MESSIANIC nutcase Iran Gambit's backfires, payback begins. The recent events orchestrated by the US government in Iran have backfired in a major way, and the repercussion has only just begun. Multiple sources agree. The worst result has been to force the British and the rest of the Anglo-Saxon world away from their alliance with the US under its current administration. MI6 sources say, whatever happened should never have happened, and the Western powers need to vacate the Muslim world and contain Israel, the sources say. Even the Israelis are waking up to the dangers of evangelical Christian nut jobs they create. Mossad sources agree. Of course, the rest of the world already views the US as a pariah state, so now US President Donald Trump is totally isolated on the world stage. Before we go further into the fallout, let us summarize exactly what happened. Basically, it was yet another attempt to start World War III by Messianic Jewish crazies who, from simplicity's sake, we would call the Zionists. This time, they orchestrate an escalating series of events in a vain effort to get their long-awaited Armageddon. By murdering an American contractor in Iraq and blaming it on the Iranians, convincing or blackmailing Trump into a disproportionate response, getting their Iranian agents and brainwashed dupes to reared by US Embassy in Baghdad, forcing Trump to commit a war crime by murdering Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, remotely hijacking a Ukrainian airliner and flying it with transporters off towards an Iranian military base to fool the Iranians into shooting it down. For those readers who do not yet realize this, in the late 1990s, the US had remote hijacking equipment installed in all civilian airlines, supposedly as an anti-hijacking measure. This ability has been repeatedly abused for political purposes by Khazarian mafia. Now they are trying and falling to orchestrate regime change in Iran. Instead, though, this botched operation has succeeded in waking up a critical mass within the Western intelligence military community to the fact the US government has been hijacked by a fanatic cult that is trying to start World War III. That is why UK Defense Minister Ben Wallace publicly announced his country was breaking away from its military alliance with the US. There has also been a huge pushback by senior minds in the US military-industrial establishment against the end times fanatic censure around presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner and his Shabbat cult. For example, US Defense Secretary Mark Expert publicly denied claims by Trump that Iran was planning for attack US embassies. Pentagon sources say, despite the heroic, Trump has no choice but to put US troops out of Iraq and eventually the Middle East. The reason Trump has no choice is, among other things, financial. The US has weighed over $7 trillion on endless war in the region and is now running out of money. This is the $7 trillion, by the way, that the Japanese were hoping to spend on ending poverty and stopping environmental destruction before the US regime stole it from them. There was a meeting between the representative of the White Dragon Society and a senior Asian secret society leader last week to discuss, among other things, a plan for bankruptcy reorganization of the US. The plan calls for the US military-industrial complex to provide hitherto hidden technology to the Asian in exchange of financial support for rebuilding the US economy, White Dragon Society sources say. The Asians, for their part, are wary of making deals with any European peoples because so many promises have been broken by them in the past. This is the result of past actions of Jewish supremacists who believe it's okay to deceive and cheat going. You reap what you sowed. The WDS pointed out that Western civilization had a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde aspect to it, and the key was in making deals with the good side of the West. It was explained to them that it was true that Asia, especially China, has experienced many humiliations and betrayals by the West. However, it was also true that while the West has long had the technical capability to kill all the Chinese, instead, they transferred technology, industry, and know-how to them to help them develop and modernize. The meeting also revealed there was a significant faction in the Chinese power structure who actually believed the Zionist nonsense that World War III is needed in order to bring on a one-world government and a one-world religion. They were warned that this was a Zionist trap intended to kill 70-100% of the world's population and enslave the rest. As an alternative, the WDS proposed that Canada and the rest of the Anglo-Saxon world be given a chance to help restore the US system to peace and sanity. It was pointed out that England and Canada has historically kept their promises and act with honor. The discussion will continue, but the chances of world peace are now much higher now than the chances of world war. A higher-level meeting between representatives of the British Commonwealth, the P3, and the Asians has been proposed. We are now awaiting an answer from the Asians. The discussion will continue in February with the start of the Chinese New Year, the Asian side says. In the meantime, expect more Zionist provocations in the South China Sea, North Korea, Africa, etc., none of which will achieve their goal of World War III. There will also be a continuance of assassinations and sudden death of Zionist leaders, Pentagon and other sources promise. Not lost in the Iran's news cycle is the death of Zionist former longtime NBA Commissioner David Stern and the death of Jewish LA billionaire Ron Barker's son. Barker was a guest on the Lolita Express, a Democratic fundraiser, and a friend of Billy and Epstein, the source note. David Koch expired last August, and other billionaires on Epstein Fight Lodge are Steven Spielberg, Tom Prickers, Glenn Dubin, and Oprah Winfrey. They add, the Asian Iran-based cult of assassins is undoubtedly going to avenge the murder of Soleimani. In the past, one of their assassins explained to this writer how they carefully infiltrate the households and families of their targets before making their move when it is least expected. Trump should have listened to the advice I once gave to a representative of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. The best way to avoid assassination is not to make enemies. Speaking about avoiding assassination, Prince Harry of the UK has now come out publicly to say he fled to Canada to save his family from the same fate that befell his mother, Princess Diana. Here is what a European royal had to say about the situation. The whole thing is a disgrace and infuriating to us all. If the monarchy carries on like this, the people will show it in the door. The matter will be managed carefully and correctly, the source said. However, it is already certain that Prince Charles will never succeed to the throne of England, he said. The Nazi Illuminati, who opposed blood-like rule, will for their part try to exploit the situation to overthrow the British monarchy. Given the huge popular support in the UK for this institution, they will probably fail, but in the meantime, the tabloids will have a feast. Whatever trouble occurs in England, however, will be minor compared to what is happening in France. President Emmanuel Macron has been forced in large-scale demonstrations and strikes to back down his plan to steal pension money from his people. However, the French are aware he stole the election that put him in power and that he does not work for the French people. Since French living standards are continuing to plummet, his regime will not be able to stabilize the situation. It's time for the French generals to take action before it is too late. Another nation that might experience big change soon is Japan. The country's population is vanishing at the rate of 500,000 people per year. This is because nobody wants to have children in a land whose future has been hijacked by Zionist gangsters. The cabinet of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is filled, according to insiders, with low IQ morons. The result is that Japanese living standards are plunging and the country is filled with impoverished elderly people. A sign of how incompetent the Japanese government is came with the entire saga surrounding the arrest and escape of former Nissan boss Carlos Ghosn. Several sources say the real reason Ghosn has persecuted was that he was planning to steal military secrets from Abe sponsors in Mitsubishi's heavy industry. If that was the case, they should have come out and said that. Instead, they fabricated ambiguous charges and made international mockery of Japanese justice system. Japan's police, in line with the US and Japanese armed force, are preparing to take power away from the Zionists and return to the country's still talented, albeit leaderless bureaucrats, according to right-wing sources close to the new emperor. On a final note this week, we are once again hearing rumblings about Antarctica and disclosure. A WDS envoy has been sent to meet a representative of the groups operating in Antarctica. We hope to have something to report about this next week.